My name is Andrew Hobday and I'm an actor. I suppose when I was a teenager and I got involved in the usual things, school plays, and I was a member of the Royal Court Young People's Theatre Scheme, which was based in Kennington, so I attended that. And then when I got my A-levels, I went to Polytechnic and was training, doing sort of business and accountancy sort of things, and realised that that just so wasn't for me. And I pretty soon realised that I wanted to go to drama school and be an actor. So that was back in the way back in the day, in the 70s. Most of my work's been theatre. I've worked all over the country, really. My first job was at Sheffield Crucible. My first proper job was at Sheffield Crucible, Winter's Tale, directed by Stephen Pimlott, and then I worked at the Liverpool Everyman, doing a really interesting production, which was an adaptation of a book by Kurt Vonnegut called Slaughterhouse-Five. I've worked and toured all over the country as an actor and as a musician. Mainly Starfish, in which I played Adrian, father, and we've toured Greater London and the UK with that, basically England and Wales. And I've also been involved in a reading of Cracked as well. So 2 productions, basically. Probably Adrian. I've been lucky in as much that there was a complete recast for it, and I was the only remaining member of the original cast, which was a really good production. We got some really good people back in for that. And that was interesting because it was a different director for that. I was working with Tom Heskett instead of Nigel Townsend. And that was very interesting for me to be playing the same character in the same play, but with a totally different slant on it in terms of, you know, a different director and a different actors to work with and respond to. I've learned a tremendous amount from working with Turing. Firstly, as I say, because I've played the same role in the same play, but with different castings. That was very interesting. But also working working very much as a team, touring. You have to work as a team because we're all responsible for the get-in, setting up the stage and the room, and also the challenge of going into these schools. Some of the schools, you know, what's happening effectively is we're going into their territory and trying to make for an hour and a half it a theatre and something that is going to hold their attention and give them plenty to think about. So there was I got a terrific amount from that, but also because it's not a theatre, and a lot of youngsters of the age groups that we were working with probably hadn't been to the theatre very often, or possibly at all, and it was very, very challenging sometimes to remain in focus. And I think now, as an actor, what I've got is a far greater capacity to really concentrate and stay in the zone, as they say, simply because of working in those conditions, because you would get a variety of responses from the young people, particularly with Starfish, which is, you know, my son Michael ends up in a wheelchair, and their reactions were very, very broad and very varied. So you have to remain very much in the moment, and you have to remain in the zone and very concentrated. I think why touring is important, the work that they do is important, because I think you're getting the opportunity to work with young people and to really, sometimes what you're doing is you're introducing the whole idea of live performance and theatre to the young people. And I think it's important because it stimulates debate, because the plays are based on things to do with, you know, the morality behind, you know, medicines and science and the medical profession and the dilemmas that professionals and ordinary people have to work their way through in order to understand, in order to understand themselves and understand, you know, what life is throwing at them. And I think to be on tour with Why Turing and to be actually touching base with a lot of young people. It's really important work, and I personally got an awful lot out of that. As an actor, I've also done youth work before, so I kind of find that sort of thing rather interesting, and actually I find it really important. And the responses that we would get, both in situ and in terms of feedback from the schools or from the colleges, you know, proved that very often we were really hitting the target, and there really was a lot of, you know, debate that had been stimulated by the subject matters that we'd been covering in the plays that we've been doing. I think they probably got a variety of things, but I think first of all, I think that their debate often was in amongst themselves, and it was to do with compassion, because this young man who is fit and healthy at the beginning of the play dies of a very serious disease, a very rare disease, and his journey, and the journey that the people who are closest to him as well, his doctor, who's also his ex-girlfriend, myself, I'm playing the father, and another character who plays a young girl that Michael teaches. We go on that journey with him, and it is, I think they see how something like this impacts on the people that are closest to Michael in the play. But also, I think, yes, just the more general thing of stimulating debate about how you go about dealing with those sort of things in terms of medical terms. But I felt that the key one was the debate about compassion and relating to something that is actually quite difficult for a lot of them to handle, which is his deterioration and eventually just not being able to eat or feed himself or do anything for himself, and he's left, the kind of shadow of his former self in a wheelchair. The word would be rewarding.